Join me, Harriet Gould, for the Lab Matters podcast to hear fascinating stories every week from the inspiring people behind the science. Timandra Harkness joins me, Harriet Gould, in this episode of Lab Matters to talk about data, touring with the circus, and a short-lived attempt at being a trapeze artist. So today we have with us Timandra Harkness. Hi, Timandra. Thank you for joining us. Timandra is a presenter, writer, author, speaker, and the list goes on. You're a regular on our screens and airwaves, and you've just published another book, Technology is Not the Problem, all of which we'll come on to, and I can't wait to read that book. I'm desperate to hear, like really desperate to hear about what led to touring as a stand-up comedian with a tented circus. But before that, I think it would be fun to track right back to the early days, the school days. What kind of pupil were you?
Well, this probably changed a bit because my primary school was a tiny village school. There were literally like 60 of us from first year infants to top of primary school. So like a class was 6 kids sitting around a table. I mean, so
Tiny.
it was really tiny, which was a bit unique because basically the only way a teacher could teach a class that consisted of 4 year groups was to set us off, like give us the textbooks and go, right, you're doing this. When you get stuck, come up to the front and I'll help you through it. Which is great for someone like me because I loved learning. So I was like, yes, give me the maths book. I'll work my way through it. And when I get stuck, I'll come and ask. But obviously not that great for kids who found subjects harder. But that meant that I'd finished all the maths like a year before I was due to leave. And also because my mum had taught me to read already. So I was bumped up a year at primary school because it's like, well, she can already read. So I had
What
this
else
kind
is
of
there?
weird limbo at the end of primary school where the teacher was brilliant. She basically went, okay, well, you've worked your way through all the primary maths things. So she sent off and she got these maths textbooks that were secondary maths project, which had all sorts of mad things in like matrices and binary numbers and all sorts of stuff that I'm sure the normal primary curriculum didn't cover.
Where did she get them from? Where did she send off
Well,
to
I don't
you?
know. She must have just like gone, okay, well, what do you do next? She was very resourceful. She was brilliant. And so like primary school, that was me. I was, busy little kid and rather bossy, I think, rather precocious. And then secondary school, I mean, I still loved the subjects, but I, socially, I didn't enjoy it as much, I think. So,
Mm.
but I was still basically beetling away learning stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
So I had kind of probably two different personalities between primary and secondary school. Is that possible? Is that?
I think so. Yeah, I think I can identify with that as well. Um, and then the maths came in quite early. I was not necessarily surprised to hear that. That was
Yeah, my mum used to say she remembered me going home from primary school in great excitement, having discovered binary numbers and trying, I mean, so, I must have been, what, a 9 or something, and trying to explain it to her. And her telling me later that she didn't really understand, but it was great that I was so thrilled about them.
absolutely. I bet your teachers must have adored you. What an
I don't
example to set.
know. I don't know. I suspect I was a bit willful and difficult, so swings and roundabouts.
Yes, they can't have everything. So then after secondary school, did you go into further education?
Yes, I went and studied. Technically, it was combined studies, but I basically did film and drama with art and art history as a minor at a
Hmm.
little college that doesn't even exist anymore in Reading. And the course was very well thought of. If you'd asked somebody who did film studies or something, you said, "Oh, I'm at Bullmarsh," they would go, "Oh, that's a very good course." It has sunk so without trace. First of all, the University of Reading absorbed it, and then one of the people I was at college with went back to them to try and get a copy of her degree certificate to apply for a master's, and they
Hmm.
said, "Oh no, we haven't got any records from that period." And we're like,
You're joking.
"It's not that long ago." It's like, how could you not have kept records?
Wow.
So yeah, so apparently the course, the college, everything has vanished
What a
without. So
shame.
I'm now telling everyone I got a first. Because how are they going to prove me wrong?
Absolutely. You got a first. There's nothing we can do about it.
Yeah. So yes, I went into the arts, and I was working. First of all, I was just working in technical theatre, doing lighting, sound, stage management, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And then I accidentally worked with somebody who had done a flying trapeze course, and he kept banging on and on about how amazing it was to learn the flying trapeze. And then he said, oh, a friend of mine is opening this little space in North London where you can go along and try it, which was the circus space. And so I went along and tried it, and I'm afraid it's quite addictive. So I basically developed a trapeze habit, and all the work I did, all my wages basically went on either fixing my car that kept breaking down or on trapeze lessons.
I mean, it
And
sounds quite dangerous flying trapeze. Trapeze doesn't sound trapeze sounds artistic. Flying trapeze sounds to me like a different thing, and it sounds dangerous.
well, yeah, I mean, all these things are potentially dangerous, but they do teach you in an organized way with a safety belt with ropes attached to it, the teacher holding the ropes. So if you are to unexpectedly fall off, the most likely thing is that you might crack a rib because they yanked too hard on the safety rope. I mean, yeah, people did break things, but the other thing is that I just wasn't any good. The thing I didn't mention
Oh
about
dear.
school was that the one subject I could not do at all was PE. Just really so bad at PE that at one point we had a student teacher at primary school who thought that I must be messing about because nobody could possibly be that bad at rounders and I must be putting it on. And in the end, after he'd reduced me to tears, the other kids went, yeah, she actually just is that bad. That's what she's always like.
Oh,
So you imagine me trying to do flying trapeze. I was useless. I was absolutely useless. But I kept trying for about 3 years, and then in the end, I went, you know what? I'm just whatever I try and do, people laugh. So clearly, I should just accept this is my fate and just go into comedy. But
that's
it still
really.
makes me sad.
I'm not surprised. I mean, I can't. I'm trying to picture what somebody doing flying trapeze artistry might look like if they were bad at it. I can't. I mean, is it just
Yeah.
the lack of elegance or
Definite lack of elegance. I mean, they didn't let me off this safety belt for 6 months because I was so
okay,
uncoordinated.
that sounds responsible.
Yeah, it looked like more like kind of a desperate monkey clinging onto the bar, really. But yeah, exactly. See, destined for comedy.
So, so you thought that and then acted on it quite literally. Oh my goodness me, everyone laughs at me. I must be a comedian.
Well, basically, yeah. I mean, it just kind of slid into doing clowning because it was all a circus thing, and then into improvised comedy, and then into stand-up comedy. So yeah, I slid into that, and then I realized that I was enjoying the writing part of it, and that if I wrote things not for myself to perform, I had a wider range of stuff that I could do. So the thing is, I have worked with a lot of people who are scientists and then use comedy to communicate the science. I was coming the other direction, right? So I was doing comedy, and then I bumped into Dr. Helen Pilcher at a stem cell meeting at the Royal Society in the tea room. She was looking very smart, and I
She's a
sidled over
she's
to
a
her. She's a
neuroscientist.
neuroscientist, exactly. And I said to her, what are you doing here? Because I'd only ever seen her in rooms above pubs doing comedy. And she said, I'm a neuroscientist. What are you doing here? And I said, well, I do some journalism. So I'm here trying to understand what's going on in case there's a story here. And she said, we should do some comedy about science. And even then, probably nothing would have happened. But she rang me up the next week saying, there's this new thing called the Cheltenham Science Festival, and we've got a booking, so we'd better write a show.
Wow, brilliant.
So that was how it started off. So we were the UK's first comedy science double act.
Wow,
So
what an accolade.
I basically came back to maths through comedy
Wow.
because we were doing comedy about science, and I started to remember how much I used to love maths at school. And I thought, well, why don't I go back and because at that point, the Open University, you could just like sign up and do a course at quite an affordable price. So
Mhm.
I did that. I thought, oh, this is really good. And I did another one.
Which
And
ones did you
then
do?
Oh, just like, basic first year maths courses.
Mhm.
And then I can't remember the numbers, I'm afraid. But then they wrote to us all and said, look, the government are making us put the fees up. Sorry about this, but because you're already doing courses, if you say that you're working towards a degree, you can continue to do them at the old fees. So that was how I ended up with a maths and stats degree
Brilliant.
after 7 years.
Nothing like a bit of serendipity.
Exactly. Yeah.
Maths and stats degree, 7 years.
Yeah.
That's well
Yeah.
done, really well done. Because, not necessarily in your nature, despite you having an early interest or an early aptitude.
Well, it
Um,
was just, I mean, it just started off, honestly, just doing it for fun.
mm,
And then
best
towards the
way.
end, it felt more like work because by that point, I was writing a lot more about statistics and data. And so that was how I ended up doing more statistical courses because they were more useful and relevant. And obviously, that makes them less fun. Whereas the early stuff was the pure maths. And I like, this is just what a great hobby. I can just go and sit on my own in my room and think about prime numbers or whatever, graph theory.
Indeed.
Group theory, my favorite
Yeah.
course.
Um, well, yeah, something for everyone, I guess. So good. Let's go back to that. The Cheltenham Science Festival, your first ever gig
Hmm.
with Dr. Helen Pilcher, and
Yes.
the first ever gig from two science stand-ups.
The
Um,
first in the UK.
okay,
There were two guys in Australia who
okay,
were doing stuff, I think mainly on radio, but they did do some live stuff. So this is why I'm always very careful to say the UK's first
okay.
comedy science double act. Yeah, we did. I think we did the 7 top things in science ever. Uh, and now I can't remember what they were. One of them was the moon landings, obviously, of course. Um, one of them was something about genetics. Uh, I remember one of them might have been flight, because I remember at some point we got volunteers out the audience and I threw myself off the stage and they caught me.
Oh,
Um,
lucky.
yeah. Well, no, we'd warned them. They were lined up and trained.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was pretty rough and ready. But we'd both been performing stand-up, so we knew how to do comedy,
Hmm.
but making it about science was quite new. So it was quite experimenting with what works. And
Mm,
obviously the audience is not entirely a typical audience because they're all people who are already interested in science. So that makes it a bit different.
indeed.
But we went on for a number of years and did a number of shows. And sometimes we get booked to do shows for teenagers at events so that you kind of lure them in and then with a good time and then kind of try and enlist them to come to your university or something. And
Good ploy. Great ploy.
yeah.
I just can't help thinking that I'll have to say it because it'll just stay in my head when you mentioned that you were better at writing for other people than for yourself as a comedian. There's a new, well, it's not that new, I'm just probably a bit late to the party, a comedy program on Amazon called Hacks, and it is about a stand-up comedian who has a girl come and write jokes for her. It's quite funny. If you haven't seen it, you must see it.
No, I haven't. I should go look for that.
Yeah, it's not science oriented, unfortunately, but it's very, very
But
funny
it is
anyway.
comedy.
Yeah. So do you still write jokes for other people now, or are you
No,
really?
I mean, I never did actually do that, like write jokes for other people, but I started then writing jokes for radio,
Hmm.
for topical radio programs, and through that ended up writing a longer script about two angels that get laid off and move in with an astronomer. And that was on the radio. But before it was on the radio, this was the other way that I kind of got back into science. We were looking for sponsorship to take it to the Edinburgh Fringe, and so kind of desperation, I rang up the Astronomy Research Council. I think it was PPARC at the time. It's Particle Physics and Astronomy Research Council, and said, look, I know, because I knew them through my journalism stuff, write about science, and I said, I know this is a long shot, but do you ever sponsor shows at the Edinburgh Fringe? Because we got this show, and basically the romantic hero is an astronomer. And they said, we have a whole fund for that kind of thing. which
Wow.
I'd never heard of this. So we had this hilarious conversation. It's like me on the phone, and then also because I wrote that play with my mother, who was also a storyteller, a scriptwriter. So she's there, and I'm on the phone, and so I was like, that we have a whole fund for this kind of thing, and I'm putting my hand over the phone and going, they have a whole fund for this kind of thing, and they said, but but we'd want to know that the science was accurate, so we'd have to link you up with an astronomer, and I'm like, they wanted to give us an astronomer as well. And we ended up working with the Astronomer Royal for Scotland, John Brown, who was brilliant and actually contributed a lot of really funny lines
Oh, how
because he really got
wonderful.
what it was about. So we took this show to the Edinburgh Fringe, and we had a free astronomer. It's like money and a free astronomer. Where's the catch? It's fantastic.
Lab Matters is brought to you by the award-winning temperature control equipment from Polyscience, available worldwide. Polyscience, changing the world of temperature control forever.
And then that got on the radio. So yeah, so it's the kind of two-pronged thing that I started working with Helen, who was a scientist, and also discovered that there was this whole thing of public engagement with science, and that amazingly they'd give you money to do comedy as part of that, which
Yeah,
I just
brilliant.
thought was extraordinary.
It's fantastic. More of that, please.
Exactly.
Um, Now, so I mentioned at the beginning that you've just written another book.
Yes.
We can mention all your other books as well, but let's focus on this
I
book.
like the way you make it sound like it's millions. It's basically two.
Basically two.
It's
Okay.
yes. Anyway, carry on.
Um, big data does size matter? That's the other one. I know that.
That's
But
right.
this one's intriguing. Technology is not the problem.
Hmm.
I concur. I completely agree. I always think everything is a useful tool, um, in the right hands.
Yes.
But you
Um,
tell
yeah.
me, tell me about the book.
Well, I mean, this started off as the subtitle, and
Mhm.
then just in the end decided why not make this the title because it says kind of what the thesis is.
What was the original title?
The original title was The Personalized Century
Oh
because
wow. Yeah, good.
it started off being about how everything is personalized now.
Hmm.
So originally it was just a follow-up to the big data book.
Hmm.
And I was particularly interested in the way, they gather our data, they profile us, and then they target things at that profile.
Mm.
And this was obviously becoming more and more of a thing. So I thought I'd write about that. But the more I looked at it, the more I thought I'm kind of more curious about the why than the how. I mean, the how is kind of interesting in a geeky way and it's useful to know, but what is it about us that makes us so susceptible to this personalizing technology? Because even though we're kind of creeped out by it, we also keep going back for more.
Hmm.
And so in the end, I did this massive zoom out. And I think my editor was a bit shocked when she got the first manuscript. She said, there's a lot of social history in this, isn't there? Because I think I go back to the 4th century AD and Bishop Gregory of Nyssa at one point. So it's like a wild, sweeping history of Western European thought.
Mm.
And it ends up in this place we are now, where one of the things we have is an absolute obsession with our own identities. And that's why we have the personalizing technology, because we constantly want to have ourselves reflected back to ourselves as we want to be seen.
Hmm.
And even if that's just a machine doing it, and even if you go, well, this isn't really personal, this is just an algorithm, but oh, look, the algorithm has noticed that I have very sophisticated, discerning taste in new bands. So, yes, thank you, algorithm. If you've noticed it, this must be objective and true because all you've done is observe my actual behavior. Therefore, I will take that as validation. So this is the basic thesis: is technology is not the problem because we're the problem.
Absolutely. I mean, I love it. I love the way that it works in that if I'm really into swimming for a while, I'll only get swimming content and then I'll move on from swimming. And I am not interested in swimming. Well, I am, but less.
Yeah.
I develop a new interest in poetry or something. And then I get loads of poetry and it really does move with my fickle nature of I go from one interest. So I think I find it quite useful. But
Oh, I mean, there's a lot of advantages to it. In many ways, it's more efficient and more convenient.
mm,
Uh,
Be interesting.
And I definitely, I'm not one of those, you have to get rid of all your social media and throw it in the sea people at all. But I do think the thing that underlies it, the kind of insecurity about who we are, that drives us to keep just saying, oh, just reassure me that I am projecting myself in a way that I want to be seen. I
Yeah.
think that's the problem. But changing that is a huge challenge.
I suppose we'd have to all stop being narcissists or
Well,
something.
exactly. Yeah, and the whole of society has developed to put us in this place. So yeah, it
Yeah.
would be much easier if we could just solve it by getting rid of our phones, but that's not how it works, I don't think.
No. Well, there's actually a bit in Hacks about that, but for a different reason.
Wow. I must watch it,
A
clearly.
different reason, a very different reason. But it's not the first time that you actually do that massive zoom out and go back into societal history, because I've noticed on your bio that you have a prop with you, Socrates the rat. And I thought that's funny because to depict Socrates as a rat in itself is quite funny, because you credited with, isn't he credited with Western philosophy.
Yeah, I can't remember why we
Is he
called
right?
him Socrates. He was in a
Right.
previous show. So
Yeah.
basically, Dr. Helen Pilcher, admirably for the future of the world, but a bit inconvenient for me, decided it was time to start a family, which curtailed her touring somewhat. And she's bought me off by making me godmother of one of the twins. So, that's something. So then I moved on and did this couple of shows with Matt Parker, stand-up mathematician. And we did Your Days Are Numbered, The Maths of Death, and we did a show about engineering. And then I did basically a solo show about brain science and gender called Brain Sex, but it co-starred Socrates the rat, who's an actual rat. So I used to joke to Matt that I had replaced him with Socrates the rat, who
I
was
see.
cheaper, cuter, and furrier, and had bigger testicles. Because I don't know if
Excellent,
you've ever
excellent.
looked at the testicles of a male rat, but
No.
they to scale, they're the equivalent of giving a man 2 rugby balls to put in his trousers. And they are
Oh,
ridiculous. They're
poor
absolutely
rats.
ridiculous. I
Poor
know.
things.
So
Well,
yeah, so Socrates. So I can't remember why we called him Socrates. There was a reason for it, but he appeared in this show, and everybody loved him more than me. Even the Wellcome Trust, who funded that show, because there was a lot of brain science in it. It was a solid show. When they came to see the show in Edinburgh, and they came backstage, and I was like, oh, was the science all right? And are you happy with the and they were like, yeah, never mind that. Where's Socrates? We want to talk to the rat.
oh,
I'm like,
excellent.
right, even the funders wanted that people would come backstage saying, can I have a selfie with Socrates?
With the
Like,
rat. Brilliant.
yes, he's over there. Yeah.
Have you still got Socrates the rat?
Well, no, because they only lived 2 or 3 years, so I'm afraid he's no
Okay.
longer with us. He didn't even get to finish
Moved
his
on.
memoirs On the
Oh,
Boards and Under Them, Memoirs of a Theatrical Rat,
oh,
which he
you
was working
must.
on at the time.
You must
Yeah, I
help
should
him
finish
with
them off
that.
for him.
Yeah, I should. So look, tell me where I can buy your book.
Oh, all good bookshops and evil bookshops, basically. It's published by HarperCollins,
Okay.
so you can just go straight to the publisher's website and buy it directly from them, or
Mm-hmm.
you can go wherever you get
I can
most of
just
your
type the
books.
title into the machine and
You can also get it as an audiobook read by me. So if listening to this podcast hasn't put you off the sound of my voice, you can get, heaven knows, 10 hours or something of me reading the book aloud to you.
uh-huh. Right. I'll bear that one in mind. We've got a range of options. It's good to know. And the book is
Yes.
called Technology is Not the Problem. So look, just before we finish, there's one question that I tend to ask everyone, so I'll ask you as well. And that is, what are your hopes for the future of science? I guess
Well,
you can have a caveat, and we can say the future of technology, because
and
it's in
science.
science technology.
Well, yeah, or data maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess so. With my more serious hat on now, I'm actually on the thanks to the Open University, I'm a graduate fellow of the Royal Statistical Society, but I'm also now on their Council of Trustees and chair of the editorial board of Significance, which is their journal. So, you know, I do take this stuff seriously. And one thing I think, so can I have kind of two overlapping things? One of them is that now we tend to talk about data as if it's nothing to do with statistics, which leads to some quite poor use of data, which could really tell us a lot, because all the basic principles of how you make sense of data and how you extract meaning from data, too much of that has been forgotten by people who go, oh, well, I don't need to think about that. I just put it into a computer program and the computer will spit out an answer. And statisticians everywhere are tearing their hair out going, but if you don't know what the algorithm is doing, how do you know what it's telling you? So I would like to see some more a bringing back together of the capacity to gather enormous amounts of data and use computers to analyze it with understanding the basic principles of statistics, which tell you, well, what does that actually mean, this answer? Because I think that way you will both get much better information from large quantities of data, and you can also leverage the thinking that statisticians have done about the caveats about understanding the world through numbers. And I think more broadly, I think science is always in a difficult position because in a way you want to know what it's for. You want to know, well, you know, is this just abstract blue sky trying to understand the world, or are you trying to solve a problem, like you're trying to find a vaccine for a disease or something? But in another way, I think science too easily gets pulled into social and political arguments at the moment, and that can discredit science, sometimes without justification, that there's a perceived like partiality, a conflict of interest, but sometimes with justification, because I think sometimes scientists allow their work to be skewed by what they think is a higher principle, or, you know, a greater good, a bigger truth, and yeah, allow them to not say the difficult things, because we all know how annoying it is where when you're investigating your hypothesis and then you find evidence that contradicts it. I mean, that's just the most annoying thing in the world, whether you're
Of course.
actual experimental scientist or whether you're just scrolling social media to look for arguments to back your argument. There's nothing worse than finding something that doesn't back your argument. But the flip side of that is the too good to check syndrome, where, and I'm sure all of us have definitely done this on social media, and you find some social media and you go, right, that's exactly, see, that proves what I'm always saying. And then it's too late after you've shared it. Someone comes along and goes, yeah, actually, that paper didn't really show that, or this has been debunked, or that's just a number somebody made up for a press release 12 years ago and it's got out there and now it's breeding in the wild.
Yeah.
So yes, an ends to too good to check syndrome. That would be my great hope for the future.
Well, let's hope that the people who have anything to do with that are listening. I mean, I suppose that's everyone really, isn't it?
It's all of us. Yeah, that's the thing. It's all of us. And it's so hard because we're human beings and we love to be proved right. And we love to belong to a group where we're all right and we all think the same thing. And it's very annoying when someone comes along with evidence and forces you to adjust your opinions.
It's like an inverted type of social identity theory.
Yes, well, it is basically, yeah. And yeah, I mean, I know we're trying to finish up, but there's some read my book, because there's some really interesting research done by Chris Bale of Duke University, where he finds that the problem on social media is not so much echo chambers and filter bubbles. It is that we go there not to have arguments, but to build our identities. And that's why we find it so hard to engage in good faith with different opinions.
And what a brilliant place to end. Timandra, thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to reading the book, and I hope that we will speak soon.
I hope so. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on.